Hello friends, welcome to our lecture series on corporate social responsibility, and in this very series of lectures on CSR, we'll be telling you briefly about what CSR is all about, what is its relevance, what are the different aspects of CSR. And before I proceed to the agenda of our lectures, let me tell you the very relevance of this topic and this topic as a subject. It is gaining huge prominence in not only in corporate but also in academic fraternity, since we are dealing with such issues of CSR in corporate. That is why it is but obvious that in commerce and management it is supposed to be the part of our course curriculum. So not only at undergraduate level but also at postgraduate level we have this topic of CSR as a subject, and that is why we thought it very important and pertinent to have a discussion on this topic of CSR. So what I'll be telling you briefly about is the key aspects of CSR, what is there into CSR, and what is the global scenario of corporate social responsibility. That will be my second point of discussion, and then we'll talk about CSR in India, and of course after that we'll be defining the CSR, what is CSR all about, because there are different definitions, different ideas, different perspectives to CSR. So it is very important for us to understand what exactly is the meaning and definition of CSR. So with this agenda, I am going to start today's discussion on corporate social responsibility, and this is going to be the part 1 of our lecture series on CSR. So let us first talk about the key aspects of CSR in Indian scenario. When we talk about corporate social responsibility, we have been studying this topic of social aspect of marketing or production in the very subject of marketing, where we were talking about the social marketing or the societal aspect of marketing, and there we used to say that since the corporate entities are receiving all the resources from the society, and after processing it they are offering it to the society. So in their production process, the people who are contributing, they are also part of society, they also come from society, and after that the customers who are going to buy our products, they are also from the society. So the very question comes, what we are doing as a corporate entity towards the society. Our survival is dependent upon the very contribution or help of society. So what is our role in making our society, what my company is doing for the betterment of society? That used to be the concept of social marketing or societal marketing. So while doing your own activities, when you are doing something, we used to call it, when you are doing something for the betterment of society, that is not polluting the environment or something like that, we used to call it societal marketing. And in social marketing, when you are going beyond your broad contours of production process or your core activities, when you are doing something which is not related to your production process, not related to your domain, that used to be called as social marketing, because there you were actually working for the social welfare. So here I'll be telling you what is the basic difference between the social marketing and societal marketing, because it is very important for us to understand that as a corporate entity we are not only dealing with the marketing but also HR and finance also. So for all domains, when we talk about CSR from the perspective of finance, we talk about the reporting, CSR reporting. What are the provisions of section 135 under Companies Act 2013, because there is a legal framework for the CSR in India. So keeping all this trend in mind, I just thought that I should first tell you about the key aspects of CSR in Indian scenario, which we are supposed to discuss, which we are supposed to deliberate, which we are supposed to understand. So you can call it as a broader syllabus or curriculum for this discussion on CSR. I'll be introducing you to the topic of CSR, what exactly it is, what is the global scenario of CSR. India has a legislatory framework for it. We have legal provision for it. We have specific section 135 under Companies Act 2013, where certain companies, those who are fulfilling certain criteria, they are supposed to spend 2% of their profit on the identified CSR activities. So a very basic question comes to, or obvious question comes to our mind, what about the other countries? India vis-a-vis other countries, what is the global scenario? So I'll be telling you about the global scenario of CSR, what is going on in different parts of the world, or you can say in other countries, what they are doing, the way they are managing CSR. That is also something which we'll be discussing. Then I'll be telling you about the applicability of CSR. what type of companies are there which for whom it is applicable. The companies which are supposed to compulsorily or mandatorily spend on CSR. There are certain sets of companies which are doing it on voluntary basis, but what about the mandate? What about the legal provisions? Then CSR expenditure, the way it is supposed to be spent, what are the identified activities, where it is given, what are those legal provisions, permissible activities under CSR, then what if you could not spend the identified amount, the amount which you are supposed to spend, because initially I told you that 2% of profit, there are certain identified companies, they are supposed to spend 2% of their profit on identified CSR activities. So what if they could not spend that amount, and is there any legal provision, penal provision for that? What are the compliances pertaining to CSR? What is CSR policy? What is CSR committee? What is the role of board which is dealing with the CSR? What about implementation of CSR in its true spirit? And reporting and disclosure will also be a part of our discussion. And impact assessment, this is something which has gained huge importance nowadays, because there are certain companies which are there to do this kind of job for the company. They are supposed to conduct an impact assessment. What impact that particular company or that particular CSR activities of that company has made on identified CSR activities, what is the benefit to the society, that is being conducted under the topic of impact assessment. And is there any penal provisions? Earlier there was no penal provision, but now there is of course penal provision after 2021. There is an amendment into Companies Act 2013. So broadly speaking, I'll be confining myself, limiting myself to the legal framework of Indian scenario, because we are going to study CSR in Indian scenario. But of course I cannot in this era of globalization, I cannot say that we'll not be talking about the global provisions, what is going on in the different part of the world. That will also be the part of our discussion. So this is in brief what we are going to discuss in this very topic of CSR. So there would be series of lectures on this, and I'll be telling you one after another what are the different aspects of CSR and the way we have to understand the very genesis, the implementation, the rules, the framework of CSR. So let us first start with the global outlook. What is going on in global scenario? Because unless we understand what is the scenario across the globe, we cannot understand the very meaning of CSR. In brief, if you ask me what is CSR, it is basically corporate social responsibility. So what is the social responsibility? What is the responsibility of corporate entities towards society? That is basically the CSR. So as an artificial entity, of course it is not a natural entity, it is an artificial entity. So as an artificial entity, companies are also operating in society. So what is their role towards the betterment of the society, and what the way they are contributing, the way they can contribute, that is something which is basically the topic of CSR, which is basically being which can be called as the very meaning of CSR, that as a corporate entity, what is my responsibility towards society. So if we look at the global outlook, globally the business houses are basically expected to carry out their activities responsibly. We expect companies to operate in a responsible manner, and they should respond in a way so that there is no harm is caused to the society at large. So suppose if I am working as a company and my factory is running, so there is no harm to the society, there should not be any harm to the society by the operation of my business enterprise. For instance, suppose there is some wastage from my company in the production process. That waste is either causing harm to the air. It is either adding to the worries of air pollution or water pollution or something of that sort. So I should ensure that my business operation should not affect the environment in any manner. This is the most popular, one of the most popular example for understanding the activity of a company in a responsible manner. So I am working as a company, my factory is basically working for 8 hours or 16 hours or even for 24 hours. So whatever wastage I am creating, that should not harm our environment in any manner. And if it is doing so, it means my company is not acting responsibly. So I'm supposed to, globally it is said that as a corporate entity you are supposed to behave in a responsible manner, your company should behave in a responsible manner, and you should conduct your operations in such a way that there is no harm to which is caused to the society at large. So society is not having any problem with your, they should not have any problem with your business operations. And if you look at the different parts of the world, there is no mandatory requirement of spending towards CSR activities in different countries, or I would say in majority of the countries there is no mandatory requirement of spending towards CSR activities. They feel that companies should do it on voluntary basis. They should understand that as a responsible corporate citizen, they should, now we talk about the corporate citizen, they are also the citizen of that country where they are operating. So as a responsible corporate citizen, they should not cause any harm to the environment, to the society, and to the people who are working. And in due course of my discussion on defining CSR, I'll be telling you what different top guns of CSR opine about this particular topic, because there are different opinions. If you look at the definition of Michael Hopkins, it is having a different perspective. Whereas if you look at the definition of Archie B. Carroll, there is a different perspective to the very definition of CSR. So there are different ways to look at CSR. Some people think that CSR is like companies giving some donations or doing some charity. Of course it is not. It is not so. Giving charity or giving donation cannot be called as CSR, cannot be categorized as CSR. Because they have to understand that as a responsible citizen of their country, they have to act responsibly, and they are supposed to contribute to the betterment of the society. So when I'll be defining, I'll tell you. So there is no mandatory requirement of spending towards CSR across the globe, barring certain countries. There are certain countries where there is a legal provision. But otherwise, if you ask me that in majority of the countries, what is the scenario? The scenario is that there is no mandate for such expenditure like we are having in India. There are certain other countries where there is a mandatory provision, but not in every part of the world, not in every country essentially. So there are, apart from mandatory provisions, there are certain reporting requirements in different countries. When I was going through the relevant literature on CSR, I could find that there are reporting requirements in different countries, that the companies are supposed to report that what they are doing for the betterment of the society. What is their business responsibility reporting? We talk about nowadays responsible business conduct. There is a UN convention also on that, which talks about UNGRBC, United Nations Guidelines on Responsible Business Conduct. So that also I'll be telling you the way companies are supposed to submit their reports. So there are reporting requirements in different countries that of course we could find to be a very common one. And there is a difference between CSR and CSR spending. Corporate social responsibility and spending out of their CSR activities, these are two different things that we need to understand from the very beginning. Most of the countries, they practice CSR, but they are not practicing spending on CSR. They are practicing CSR. This is what most of the countries, they are claiming, that we practice CSR. We understand the very importance or significance of our social responsibility, but that doesn't mean, that doesn't amount to spending some amount on CSR activities. So if let us talk about the country-wise scenario. I'll be going through some popular continents only. If you look at the US, what is there in United States of America? Because whenever we talk about the global scenario, the first very country which comes to our mind is the US. That what is there into the states, what is going on. So their CSR team in Bureau of Economic and Business Affairs, which is known as EB, Economic and Business Affairs, it basically leads businesses in promotion of ethical businesses, and EB is basically serving as source of guidance for developing CSR policies. So in a country like US, there is a Bureau of Economic and Business Affairs, and they are leading businesses in promotion of ethical business. And this is the reason why when we talk about the CSR, the ethics and governance, it is coming as a prefix to it. So in most of the academic curriculum you will find that the subject is not called as CSR only, it is called as ethics, governance and CSR. So it is emanating as a governance from Bureau of Economic and Business Affairs in a country like US, where they talk about the ethical, they are promoting ethical businesses, and EB is serving as a source of guidance for developing CSR policies. They are developing those CSR policies and it is being implemented by them, and companies are following it. Following it as a given guidance for the development of their CSR policies, and of course they are implementing. But there is no mandate of spending some identified amount on identified activities like our country is having. But I'll tell you what is the need of having this kind of provision, and what is the beauty of the legal provision which our country is having, what is the benefit to it. That will be discussing under the impact assessment, that what impact they have made. There is an impactful assessment of these CSR activities, and you will be surprised to note that the extent of contribution these companies are making towards the betterment of our society because of this legal provision of section 135 under Companies Act 2013. Although there are some companies, we cannot deny that there are certain corporate entities in our country for which we can say with pride that they are spending huge amount on CSR on voluntary basis as well. There is a specific limit of spending 2%, but there are companies which are spending much ahead of that 2% of legal requirement. And before this mandate came, they have been spending. So there are companies, I'll be showing you those top 10 companies also, and their contribution towards the betterment of our society by the way of spending on CSR activities. If we talk about the second important country, UK. In UK, CSR is basically a part of corporate governance, and directors, they are supposed to consider community and environmental issues. Their directors who are working in the company, they are supposed to consider the community and environmental issues, and disclosure is supposed to be made in business review. So they have to report, they have to disclose what they are doing for the betterment of society, what they are doing for this CSR, which is basically a part of corporate governance only. So here also there is no legal requirement to spend an identified amount on CSR activity. In Europe, if you look, their strategy is built upon the principles of United Global Compact, that is voluntary initiative to implement universal sustainability principles, and they have ISO 26000 guidance standard on social responsibility. So ISO 26000 certification, that basically talks about the way company is taking care of social responsibility, and they have also adopted the OECD guidelines for MNCs. So this is the way the entire Europe is managing this very affair of CSR. They are actually taking care of this activity of CSR by the way of ISO 26000 and OECD guidelines. If you look at Denmark, they have Danish Financial Statement Act, which mandates companies of certain size to disclose CSR practices in their annual report. So they have certain provisions which are identical to our country, that they have identified, they have given some benchmark that certain size of companies, they are supposed to disclose CSR practices in their annual report prominently, and their reporting requirement is basically on three significant topics. First is, what is your CSR policy, what is your plan of action, and what are your achievement out of that plan of action. So they not only ask for the policy reporting, but also about the action taken by them. You can call it as ATR, action taken report, and of course the achievement out of it, that what are those achievements which you have made out of this CSR plan, and after working on that, walking your talks, what you have done. So companies, they are supposed to account for human right policy and climate impact. So there they are prominently talking about the human right policy of the company, the way they are treating their employees, the way they are treating their other stakeholders, and of course the climate impact that cannot be denied. So this is the scenario in Denmark, where they have made it in a way mandatory for certain companies of certain size to disclose CSR practices in their annual report. If you talk about France, South Africa and China, they have a similar mandatory reporting obligation as the Denmark is having. So they are identical to the policy of Denmark. If you talk about the France, if you talk about South Africa or China, they have similar kind of mandatory requirement the way Denmark is managing. So, but it is limited to the reporting requirement. They have to disclose what they have done, what is their CSR policy, what action they have taken, and what are the achievements, what are the milestones achieved out of those activities. So this was in brief what is going on globally in the field of CSR. What is the scenario of CSR across the globe? So globally, the CSR is basically you can say, barring certain countries where they have a mandate to report. In majority of the countries across the globe, they don't have any mandatory provision for compulsorily spending on CSR. They have confined it to the reporting requirement, or they feel that it is the duty of company as a corporate citizen to behave responsibly. Now coming to our country, what is going on in terms of CSR in India? India has basically legislated CSR spending as a mandatory requirement under our Companies Act 2013. So Companies Act 2013 talks about mandatory CSR spending under section 135. And CSR in India is basically two-folded. If you try to understand what is the framework in our country, it has two folds. Companies, they have to undertake business activities responsibly so that there is no harm to the society. This is something which we expect from the companies to do in an obvious manner. It should be the usual practice, it should be an obvious practice by the company that they should not cause any harm to the society. Not only the Companies Act 2013, but there are certain other enactments also which actually mandate that they are supposed to abide by the guidelines, those rules and regulations, where they have to take care of environment also. There is an Environment Protection Act also for that. So we expect from the companies to undertake business activities in such a manner that there is no harm to the society. And companies have to, second fold is, companies have to go out and spend funds annually for the welfare of the society. They should contribute something to the society, because they are with this statement I started my discussion, that they are not only receiving their input from the society, but their output is also being offered to the society. So their entire survival is dependent upon the cooperation, contribution and help of society. So they should come out of their routine corporate activity and spend some funds annually for the welfare of the society. They should do something for the betterment of the society. This is the second aspect of CSR in India. And there are penal provisions on non-spending. There were no on non-spending until January 2021. There were no penal provisions. It was comply or explain. But now there are penal provisions with effect from January 2021. Now, after understanding the global scenario vis-a-vis Indian CSR, now it's time to understand. We have been repeating a key word time and again, CSR, CSR and CSR. But what exactly is the meaning of CSR? What is corporate social responsibility? Now it's time for us to understand what is CSR all about. It is basically a way of conducting business by which corporate entities visibly contribute to the social good. We are basically conducting our business operations in such a way that corporate entities, they are contributing to the social betterment, to the social good, and that should be visible. This is what is the meaning of CSR. Socially responsible companies, they are using CSR to integrate not only economic but also the environmental and social objectives with the company's operations and growth. So companies, essentially their objective is economic. They are supposed to, their survival is dependent upon the profit which they have generated. So socially responsible companies, they are using CSR for the integration of those three important dimensions, which is called as economic, environmental and social objectives. And they are supposed to do it with the company's operations and growth. CSR never says that you should not take care of your growth, you should not make profit, you should not create wealth. CSR basically says that while doing all this, there has to be an integration among economic, environmental and social objectives. You are achieving your economic goals, we don't have any problem, but you should take care of environmental and social goals as well. That is what is the basic, you can say, the genesis of CSR. That is what can be called as the essence of CSR. CSR in its true spirit says that you should make profit, but without harming environment or without compromising social objectives. CSR is basically a process by which a company thinks about and evolves its relationship with the stakeholders. There are different stakeholders. They have to think and evolve their relationship with the stakeholders. For what? For the common good, and secondly for demonstrating its commitment in this regard by adoption of appropriate business processes and strategies. This is what the company is supposed to do. And remember that CSR is different from charity or donations. Most of the experts, they are common, they have the common opinion on this, that CSR is different from the charity or donation. You are giving donation to some NGOs or giving donations to some needy people. That is not CSR. The donation doesn't amount to CSR. Now coming to the key definitions of CSR, there is a very popular definition given by Archie B. Carroll. Carroll says that social responsibility of business encompasses what? The economic, legal, ethical and discretionary expectations that a society has of organization at a given point in time. This definition given by Carroll has different dimensions. It talks about the social responsibility of a business encompassing the economic, legal, ethical and discretionary expectations which we are having, which the society is having from our company. I'll be explaining it in detail in the second part of my discussion, where I'll tell you that what are those different aspects of Carroll's definition, because Carroll has given a model also, that while achieving your economic goals, you should talk about the legal obligations, you should think of ethical, and of course there are certain discretionary expectations which is at your discretion, but you should take care of that. That is what Carroll wanted to tell. There are other experts also who have defined CSR, and the European Union's definition is there. There is a definition by Michael Hopkins, there is a definition by David Crowther. So different experts who are extensively working on the topic of CSR, they have defined. I'll be discussing those definitions in due course of my lectures on CSR. I hope you have understood the very basic idea or basic discussion on CSR, global outlook, what is going on in India, and in the next lecture of mine I'll tell you about the different definitions and other aspects of CSR. Thank you so much.